This is a main share meeting, and today it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Scott L. from Tennessee, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing, or if you would like to ask Scott a question. Scott, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sky, and thank you, Young, for inviting me. And wow. I'm Scott Lee. I'm alcoholic, and it's a big deal for an alcoholic to be invited back anywhere. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, kids, so much. I appreciate it. And I want to open, as I always do, with a quote from Lois Wilson, who was asked what she did in a moment of silence. She said, "I invite God to the meeting." In case you don't have a God, or you got here like I did, afraid there might be one, let me recommend you borrow mine if you don't have one. You can address him as a God of God's limited understanding and get you up on the right foot. And if you have a God that's working for you, fantastic. But let's a few moments, just take a couple of moments and invite God to join us. Amen. Yeah. Thank you. It is just always such a joy for me to come join you kids. I think this is just such fun. I love us. So many particular words jump out at me on this particular reading. And the first one was truth, which I was allergic to when I came to you. I was terrified of the truth. As a matter of fact, the big book describes me perfectly in a single sentence on page 23 in the center of it, where it says, once in a while, he may tell the truth. Once in a while, maybe. And to me, truth was kind of like an old sweater. If you got a hold of a string and started pulling, there's no telling what you might pull out. So I don't give you any of it. And I would lie to you for credit when I could have gotten cash for the truth. That's my history. So being honest is a new experience for me, and it has taken some getting used to. Kind of like being innocent. It takes a while. If you're new, it takes a while to get used to being innocent. Don't let that trouble you. We all had to go through it, because that's just the way it is. And it talks about rigorous honesty. Don Major, I hope you know that name. If you don't, do yourself a favor and get some of Don's talks. He might be the best we ever had on steps 6 and 7. But he was a good friend of mine and one of my mentors. And he said, rigorous honesty is for me, about me. I must be rigorously honest about myself to myself. To you, it's compassionate honesty. And I think that's really what this reading is talking about, that I do not need to be using the truth as a bludgeon. I hear some things that trouble me, and one of them is this term, tough love. I don't think there's anything tough about love. Every time I've ever seen anybody applying what they call tough love, it looked to me like unresolved control issues. And they're trying to bludgeon somebody into doing it their way, or what they call truth. That's not what this thing is about. So it is about compassionate honesty. And that's been so important for me, to learn compassion, to care deeply about you, and to ask the question always, what's the next most loving thing I can do? That's an awfully good question. And the reference is step 9. And I'm going to talk extensively, I think. I don't know where this thing's going to go, but I think I'm going to talk quite a bit about step 9, which I think is one of the most important things anyone can ever do. For me, from my perspective, the forgiveness process in step 4 is the most important thing I have ever done in my life, not just in my recovery. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I hope you'll find out. And it was not about the writing. It was the forgiveness process. Forgiveness is nothing I can do. It's something I had to open up and receive. We closed a lot of meetings with a particular prayer, and one of the phrases in it is, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive. I think what that says is, God, if I don't forgive them, don't you forgive me. I'm asking to be graded by my own standards. I have consequently relaxed my standards. My sponsor told me years ago, he said, what you really want is mercy for yourself and justice for everybody else. And the package is mercy for everybody, or justice for everybody, and you are part of everybody, and you get to choose. And I can't face justice. I've done too much. I've therefore chosen mercy for everyone else. And when I chose it for them, I chose it for me. I think it's the single most important thing I've ever done, is to go through that prayer process to open up to receive the gift of not hating you anymore. Forgiveness is not something I could do, it's something I had to open up to receive. The second most important thing I've ever done was make the amends at step 9. I just turned 81 years old. I shouldn't be here a lot longer. And I cannot afford on that day for my soul to stand naked before my creator, guilty of hating one of his other children. I can't pay that price. I also can't pay the price of standing there guilty of having done something that left someone else with a resentment that blocked them from him, unless I can point at some place in this life of mine where I tried to repair that damage. I don't have to get it repaired. That's not my responsibility. I don't do results anymore. That's what not being a manager means. It means I don't do results. I'm responsible for action, not result. But I have to be able to point at a place where I tried to make that right. It's to me, it's the second most important thing I've ever done, because I must attempt to free them also. I must attempt to free them. I got to try to free everyone. And there's only one day I can do it, of course, and that's today. I was told if I wanted to strengthen a muscle, I should use it. I claim I want stronger faith. Welcome to step 9. Here's a chance to use it. And I think if there's a block to step 9, is that your God isn't big enough. That your God isn't big enough. Many years ago, one of the fellows I sponsor, and I have permission to tell the stories I tell, by the way. I think it's important you should know that. This fellow had been a vice president of a Wall Street brokerage firm, a big one. But his alcoholism stripped it all. And when he got sober, he was living in a borrowed car. It was convertible and it leaked. And he had nothing. And he tells the story of coming home today to an answering machine. You guys, you young kids, ask somebody, they'll tell you what an answering machine was. But he came home to his answering machine and hit the button. And the voice said, "This is Agent Smith of the Internal Revenue Service, and you have an appointment in my office at 1010 Church Street, Suite 400, 9 o'clock Tuesday morning. If that's in conflict with your schedule, I suggest you change your schedule." And he walked in there and was hit with a bill for $167,000. He's just gotten out of a borrowed car and now living in an efficiency apartment. He's a little bit thin on $167,000. And he said, "What should I do?" And I said, "You want God to be real in your life? Treat him like he's real. Collect the papers, get with
Like, hi. I love that God. um, so not I'm Barclay, I'm an alcoholic, and Scott is my sponsor. I've heard his talk a couple of times. And I'm going to actually, I happen to know the story that he's even telling. Huh? What? And I know the gentleman he's talking about, I won't reveal his identity either, but what ended up happening was he went in and Scott told him, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to tell Scott's story. You know what? I've been waiting for an opportunity to tell Scott's story for years. This is great. He invited the gentleman, if you want to make God real, treat him like he is real. Treat him. So what he would do, what he tells me to do, what he tells all of us to do, is to open the door for him when you get in the car, let him get in the car. When you get there, open the door for him, let him get out. When he went into the IRS agent's office, he opened the door for him. Oddly enough, there were 2 chairs, one for him, one for God. He sat down. Long story short, what ended up happening was he had a bill for, hold on a second, I think someone just got here. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Lee. that God? Sit down. I'll be back. Okay. So now Dan, sorry, the gentleman is at the IRS agent's office. He's invited God. God's sitting next to him. He's and take it. I love this.
Don't pay the ransom. I escaped. Yeah. And he said that when he walked in, there were two chairs on his side of the desk, and he knew he was going to win. And 6 months later, they wrote him a check for $1,200. and that was the end of that. Yeah. And yeah, we hear those stories all the time. That's just as common as can be among us. It says on maybe page 46, God does not make too hard terms for those who seek him. That's been my experience. That translates into Tennessee English as God ain't mad at me, which is some awfully good news, because that's not what I've been told. Barclay and I have been playing with an idea for some time, and it's the difference between religion and spirituality. And I don't think we've got this thing completely figured out yet. But one of the differences I note is religion says, believe this. Spirituality says, we did this, and we think if you do it, you'll like the result. It's the difference between believe, which I can't seem to change my beliefs, but I can change my actions. And as I've changed my actions day after day after day, I've become changed, and my beliefs have changed, but I can't change them. Believe this. Well, how? Well, they can't tell me. I can't either. But you can tell me what you did. And that if I do what you did, you think I'll get what you've got, and you like what you've got, and I like what you've got. So I trusted you, and I started working on that. So talking a little bit more about step 9 as I catch my breath.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, did you tell him I sponsor you? I did the best I could with him. This is not my fault. You should have seen him when I got him. Anyway, so some things about step 9 that I really want to talk about. I hear people saying their amends to their children will never be complete. I disagree with that. I went to my children one at a time and sat down and we talked about it. I have long believed that amends is not a lecture process. It's short. I asked the men I sponsored to not take the 4th breath when they're making amends. Your mother doesn't need to hear your 5th step. Here's amends to mom. I wasn't as good a son to you as I could have been, and I know I broke your heart. I'm doing better now, and part of that is to repair the damage I've done. What can I do to make the past right? End. Now, if she needs to talk about it, absolutely. I got to listen to it. She does not need for me to replay what I did that I thought harmed her. It will not help her a bit, not a bit. So it is really about repairing the damage. And delineating the damage won't help. If she needs to talk, yeah, absolutely. So with my children, I did that. I said, do you need to talk? And we talked about it. And I asked for their forgiveness and received it. My amends to my children are complete. I'm trying to be the best father I can be today. It is not 9th step work, it's 12th. Spiritually awakened men who have children try to be good fathers. And if I think it's 9th step work, I have not received their forgiveness or God's or my own, and I have work to do. I do not believe in living amends. I don't see it in my book. And I tried to hide behind living amends when I was new. Well, I'll just continue. I'll just be a good guy from now on. That'll be good enough. Well, it's not. It's not. And I just don't happen to believe in living amends. It's just me. Whatever you're doing suits me fine. It's just my perspective on it. It can be completed. And my amends to my children are complete. My amends to my parents are complete. Matter of fact, to the best of my knowledge, my amends to everybody are complete. Because my sponsor was one of those hardcore guys who thought I was too sick to stay sober on the fellowship. I would need the program also. And which the program, by the way, the definition of the program is our very best kept secret. We keep it secret by reading it most of the meetings. Here are the steps we took. It was suggested as a program recovery. Steps are clearly not part of the program. They are the program. And that's, according to the 4th and the 3rd edition, that's the Cliff Notes, what you see on the wall. My sponsor said if that was the whole program, we'd have a pamphlet instead of a book. Kind of an interesting perspective. He thought I needed the whole thing. He thought I was a lot sicker than I thought I was. Today, I agree with him, but my perspective was not very good on some of these things. The noted American philosopher Alfred E. Newman once said, I see some puzzled looks. That's the guy on the cover of Mad Magazine, for your information. Once said, most people don't know what they want, but they're pretty sure they haven't got it. And I really think that's really how I got here. I want to talk about something really specific. A lady friend of mine in another state that I had the privilege of serving as her spiritual advisor, and she has really lit me up for several years, was working with a lady who had prostituted herself. And she gets to step 9 and feels like she owes amends to herself. Most of us think we owe amends to ourselves, and we don't. This is an extreme exception. Yes, absolutely. This is what they came up with. She sat down with a pencil and figured out how much money she thought she'd made that way. And she donated that amount of money to Magdalene House and some other charities. What she said was, I had sold my self-esteem. I'm buying it back. Powerful, powerful, powerful. If I could just tell one thing to the entire fellowship, that might be the thing I would choose. I think that is just so powerful. I want to talk. I don't want to talk about some of this, but I think it's important that I do. Another sponsee of mine and I were in Canada some years ago doing a workshop, and we were talking about making amends. So how does a guy, I'm doing the best I can with this, folks. How does a guy make amends to a lady whose charms he's availed himself of lately, like he didn't even call the next day kind of thing? How do you make amends for that without making her feel cheap? Darn good question. And some ladies helped us with that. And this is what they said. So item 1, I don't make the initial call. I need to get a lady from my home group who's got some time to make the call. I don't want her new husband to say, who was that guy on the phone and what did he want? So I can't set up for it to hurt her. But having a lady from the home group call, no big deal. I'm friends with this guy. He thinks he's harmed you. He'd like to make amends. Are you willing? If she says no, we're done here. If she's willing, does she want a phone call? Does she want a text? Does she want it in person? If she wants it in person, I'm going with him if it's a guy I sponsor. And this is what the amends sounds like. I was not as good a friend to you as I could have been, and I disrespected you, and I'm ashamed of it. And I believe I've harmed you, and I would like to make it right. What can I do? The end. I forbid the men I sponsor to use the word sorry. We wore sorry out 2 decades ago. Nobody buys sorry anymore. That word means nothing to these people. I was wrong. I harmed you. I'm ashamed. Or a combination of those works well, I think, in amends. I think it works really, really well. And the problem, the reason I restrict to 3 breaths is if I talk long enough, I'm going to throw in an excuse for myself. And when I do that, it's going to take all the power away from the other person. You got to be very careful not to do that. Also, by the time I get a guy to step 9, his life has changed. Don Pritz, if you don't know that name, please do yourself a big favor. Pritts, Denver. He was trustee at large. Among other things, he took aid to Russia. Phenomenal individual and one of my mentors. And I asked him, what's a sponsor's primary responsibility? And he said it's to not allow the sponsee to settle for relief, but to get him all the way to recovery. Because by the time I get him to step 9, he's got relief, right? He's got a job. He's been promoted at work. He knows where all the dents in the car came from. He brings the whole paycheck home. His key fits in the front door. When he walks in, they don't scatter. His phone rings. That's a miracle. He answers. Another miracle. He's back in the big bed. Now, he may not have crossover privileges yet, but he's back in the big bed. So his motivation has waned. And my job is to keep him moving, to not let him settle for that relief, but get him all the way to recovery. How do you do that? The first thing I do is by the time I get him to step 9, I got him sponsoring. We're going to find him a rookie. And we're going to get that rookie's permission for him to talk to me in detail about his life, blanket permission. And I will coach my sponsee through coaching his sponsee through these 12 steps. I do that as many times as we need to maintain the integrity of the message. That's what I've been taught to do. couple of things happen. Number one, by this time, he's got message. He's got message. Also, when he picks up his first sponsee, our relationship changes that day. Instead of calling me every day with the emergency du jour, he starts calling twice a week with something absolutely hilarious his rookie has either said or done. It's a complete change in our relationship, and I've been looking forward to it for some time. Right, Meg? I see you laughing. Yeah, yeah. And it's a big change. The other thing is, as he sees his sponsee progressing through the steps, he's not going to want him to get to 8 before he finishes 9 himself. It keeps him moving. The other thing is I apply one day at a time to it. He's going to look at it, and I tell him too, if you can't tell me how you harmed this individual, you don't owe them any amends. You do not owe them amends for thinking bad thoughts about them. It didn't hurt them, it hurt you. You don't owe an amend for that. Do you ever meditate? Try to get your mind to a place where there's nothing? Well, I just scored. I don't have any idea where we are in this. It'll be okay in a minute. I got notes. Hold on a minute. So, oh yeah, so I got him sponsoring. And so he's got 60 amends. And he knows he can't make 60 amends, but he can make one tomorrow. We're only 2 months away from it. Apply one day at a time to the amend process. It doesn't take that long. It also is very difficult to commit to making the amend if I don't know what it is. And he and I need to talk about that. We need to have a good feeling for what is that going to look like. If you owe money, I think it's important to take some money. If you owe them $1,000, show up with at least 100. If you're absolutely sure you can pay them 100 a month, promise 50 and pay 100. It's a new concept for most of it. It's called under promise, over deliver. We've been working that backwards for a long time. Yeah. I think that's a good way to do that. If he's got multiple financial amends, I like to start with the smallest one first, so we can have some progress. It'll be easier for him, and it'll be better for him. And so I say, let's take about 10 of your 60 for a ballpark. Let's talk about which ones you want to do first. Now, if he's in the process of divorce and wants to go to his future ex-mother-in-law, I don't think that's a good place to start. But if what he says makes sense, we pick out 10 and talk about what that amendment might look like. We're not asking you to turn your will and life over to care of somebody who may be in love with hating you. I used to sponsor Big Ken Sweeney, and Big Ken said that before he got sober, he hated everybody and he wished there was more of them. He was absolutely in love with hate. And if you'd gone to him before he got to recovery to make amends to him, he would have bashed you for the rest of your life if you'd let him. So the person you're going to make the amends to is not final authority in the amend. My sponsee and I are prayerfully. We need to know what he thinks it should be, but he's not final authority. We are prayerfully. You don't have to turn your life over to somebody that may be in love with hating you. That's not what this process is about. So he's sponsoring. He's got a lot going on in his life. I want him to schedule one. All right. So we've talked about these 10. Which one do you want to do first? Okay, great. When can you call him? Why can't you call him right this minute? Good. Book your appointment as soon as you can. Tomorrow at 2:00? Great. I'll be looking for your phone call at 2:15 tomorrow. 2:15 tomorrow. How'd it go? Went great. Outstanding. Who's next on the list? Oh, good choice. When can you call him? Why can't you call him now? Book it as soon as you can. Oh, 2:00 tomorrow? Oh, good. I'll be looking for your call at 2:15. Got it? One day at a time, applied to making amends. And it takes them right on through it. Some amends will become 12-step calls. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that. I'll tell you a couple of stories of amends that have happened around me. One, this fellow I sponsor on the schoolyard in like the 3rd grade grabbed another kid's stocking cap behind his back. It's gone. Nobody knows. It's just gone. When no one's looking, he flings it up in a tree and it disappears. He never comes clean about what happened to the hat. That kid's from a poor family and goes through that winter with no hat. Here we are 30 years later. He doesn't know the kid's name. The school is no longer there. Clearly, there's no way he can make amends. Don't you ever believe it. And he and I said prayerfully. And the next day, all the kids at the orphanage got Tennessee Titans stocking caps, and my sponsee got free. A way will be shown. Bob Darrell, if you do not know that name, go get it. He is a great teacher and speaker. He and I did a number of whole weekends together. And he talks about that the only thing necessary to make amends is your willingness to do it. When you bring that piece to the party, the universe will rearrange itself to make it possible. And I've seen it over and over and over again. Bring the willingness to the party. And what's going to happen through this amends process is your God's going to get bigger. I had one myself. I'm going to talk about two of my own. I flew a gunship in Vietnam, and the sales manager for one of the companies I represented was on the ground over there. He was actually in Laos. He was a Green Beret. He was up there several years in northern Laos and North Vietnam. And when he got there, the hill tribesmen were carrying crossbows. He brought them M16s and led them in combat for 2 years. He does not know today how many times he's killed with his hands. He doesn't know. And he and I were drinking buddies. Guys flying my airplane saved his life multiple times. And anyway, we were drunk one night, and he admitted that he was sleeping with the boss's daughter. And she was gorgeous and younger than his daughter. And I was drunk another time and said something about it, and it got back to him. And of course, I lied my way out of it. What else am I going to do? And I got sober, and I realized I've got to face this man. And he came to town for a trade show and called me. I said, I need to come see you. He said, great. There's my room number. I said, I'm on the way. And I did what I told you before. I asked God to go with me. And I held the door. I said, I can't do this if you don't go. I can't do this. I can remember standing outside his hotel door like this, getting ready to knock, knowing that if this man decides to kill me in the next 5 minutes, I could be dead, and I can't even slow him down. And I went in there and was able to make that amends. And I'm not holding myself up as a shining example. I don't think I am one. But what's in this blue book works first time, every time, period. And I went in there and made that amend. And a month later, my wife and I were guests in his home for a week. Don't doubt the power here. Don't doubt the power. You got a big book handy?
I do.
I didn't bring mine. Thank you. Another story I like to tell. This is a gift from Miss Linda, who was my second wife, who's a great Al-Anon speaker, Linda Q. If you've done what I'm about to say and you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. I'm not here to indict you. I'm simply telling my story. As a young man, I paid for an abortion, and it felt to me like I'd killed one of my own children. And I thought I had committed the unforgivable sin, and there was no way to make amends. This is page 83. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. And I've been in the hands of big book people since my early days. And I was sat down and told to write that child a letter. My experience has been that letter, like the fourth step, is not so much about writing as it's about observations and prayers. That letter is not so much about writing as it is about tears. I'm told that my tears washed the windows of my soul. And that's what happened for me. And I said, and I wrote an amends letter to that unborn child. And I cried and cried and cried. And when I thought I was finished, I was told to sign it, Love, Dad. I was not finished. And I was handed a plain white envelope. It said, address the envelope. I said, how? Well, where's the child? With God in heaven. Exactly. Address the envelope. No return address, extra postage. That's a long way from Nashville, Tennessee. And I mailed that letter and got free. In my lineage, we do not hear fifth steps. We exchange them. When somebody does their fifth step with me, they hear all of mine. And a number of years ago, one of the fellows I sponsored called me and said, I did not have the abortion experience, but I'm sponsoring a guy that did. He needs to do the amends letter, and I don't have the experience. Would you sit with him? I said, you know I will. When we finished that letter, and he signed it, Love, Dad, I handed him a plain white envelope, and he said, no. He said, I think I want to burn this, not in the sense of destroying it, but to send it in smoke. I said, you bet. And we went out in the backyard and he burned it and put the ashes on the roses and he got free. And I don't have his permission to tell you that story. He begged me to tell you because he got free. That's what happens to people who get free, is they have this tremendous need to try to help somebody else get free, because that's what this whole thing is about. New freedom. The old freedom was 4 shots of Cuervo Gold and I could come out and play, right? The new freedom is we dug the poison out of my soul, allowed me to blossom into the guy that God put me here to be. That's what it's all about. If you're new, we're not here to change you into anything. You're already everything you ever needed to be. You just didn't know it. You just didn't know it. This loving, laughing God who created smallmouth bass, vanilla ice cream, and sex. Good job. Thank you. That guy was not having a bad day in the middle of a long losing streak when he created you or me. We were just wrong about that. And this is about helping you evolve into who you've always really been. Bring to mind, if you will, the 2 worst things you ever did. Got a couple? Okay. That's not who you are, clearly. Because if that's who you are, they would not be in the category of worst things you ever did. That must be who you're not. So I was told what they would teach me here is how to quit doing who I'm not, how to repair the damage for having done who I'm not, and who I really am will emerge from the ashes like the phoenix. And that ain't poetry. That's what we do every day here. That's what this package is about. It's about digging the poison out of your soul to free you up, to blossom into the person he put you here to be. God didn't make any junk. No junk. Everybody's a bestseller. You just got to learn how to help them open up. That's all this whole thing is about. That's what it's about. This is another gift from Miss Linda. And that's where I got this. And I want to share with you. It's one of the most powerful things I've ever come across. I'm aware pretty much of my sins of commission, the things I did that harmed you. What I miss is the sins of omission. She said, to whom do you owe thanks? Who helped you that you didn't thank, or you didn't thank profusely enough? And she was right. When I was a senior in college, I was in ROTC. I was on the way into the Air Force to be a pilot, and I got 30 hours of flying time as a senior in college from the Air Force. And the man that taught me was a retired Air Force colonel. And I mean, he was as mean as a divorce lawyer. Holy mackerel. And what happened was that he saw I was one of the gifted ones, and I was. And he wouldn't let me coast. I could have coasted, and he would not let me coast. He worked me like a rented mule. He would not let me coast. And he set up my Air Force career. And I went back and thanked him for that. I went back to my major professor in college. And I said, I would have never graduated without you. I learned so much from you. I would have never graduated without your tutelage. Thank you. And went to my mother at a very different time. And hear that. This is not to be done concurrently. At a very different time, I went to her and said, thank you for being my mom. Gee, you were a great mom. Thank you for all your sacrifice. Thank you for all I learned. Thank you for the freedom to make my mistakes. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your pain. Thank you for the fear in your heart when I was at risk. Thank you. No one ever had a better mother than I did. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. And then I went home and wrote that longhand in a letter, and I mailed it to her. My mother died in a nursing home of Alzheimer's. And at the end, she didn't have much left. She had that letter. And I challenge you, and don't get ahead of it. The 2 things necessary to do 9-step amends are 1, the first 8 steps, and 2, adult supervision. Do not get out there and start making amends if you're a newcomer. It ain't time. Jerry Crow told me 40 years ago, those steps are numbered so geniuses like Scott don't try to take them out of order. There's a good reason for those numbers. Don't ignore them. Wow, that gets me sometimes. So get out there. Who didn't you thank? Who didn't you thank? Boy, I mean, you want to have some fun. You want to have some fun? Get out there and thank them. Get out there and thank him. One of my favorite misreads, somebody was reading the 9-Step Promises many years ago. This was told to me, I was not there. And they handed the promises to somebody, random person sitting there. It was a kid in treatment who was not doing real well at the moment, who read, "Fear of people of economic insecurity will level us." And I think that's exactly right. And what takes me out of the business of those things loving me is the amends process. This whole thing is about me becoming the real me. That's what it's about. And I want to close with a story. Many years ago, there was a guy who was a sport parachutist. He loved free fall, the acrobatics and the tumbling and diving that you can do in free fall. And he had many, many jumps. One particular day, as they approached the drop zone at about 10 or 12,000 feet, he, as an instructor, was doing final check on his novices, and they hit some turbulence. And of course, the door was off the plane. He was thrown out, and he had violated one of the rules, and that was the one. He's out at 10,000 feet with no parachute. And he was faced with this is a true story. And he was faced with a choice. And his choice was to be terrified of the future, to place blame, to have a presumptuous resentment and negative emotion, or to do the thing he loved the most for the rest of his life. They watched him as he fell, and he tumbled and he dived, and he did all the acrobatics you can do in free fall. I would propose that all of us fell out of the plane the moment we were born. Unlike the skydiver, we don't have a good idea when it's going to be over. We face the exact same set of choices: to be terrified of the future, to place blame, to have a bunch of resentment, negative emotion, or to do the thing we love the most for the rest of our lives. It was necessary for me to do all the 12 steps to dig the poison out of my soul, to blossom and find out who I really am, to find out what it is I love to do the most. What I love to do the most is to hang out with us. People in recovery are the most fascinating people in the world. And my great joy, my great pleasure, my great excitement is to just spend one more day on this planet with people like you. I love you with all my heart. Thank you.
Yay.
You want to mute me?
And Young, I think you're going to stop the recording now. Wow, Scott, you got me there with